crafters, this is Yana Smakula for SimonsSTM.com. Welcome back for another Yippee for Yana episode. As you may or may not know, I am Ukrainian and I am currently located in Western Ukraine. You might think this is not the time for me to be making cards and filming videos, but card making has always been my therapy and it is even more so now. I will continue to create cards and film videos for as long as I can, and I thank you for your support. Instagram is booming with blue and yellow cards these days. There are so many amazingly inspiring projects featuring the two colors of the Ukrainian flag. Blue, which is commonly known here for clear blue sky, and yellow for fields of wheat or fields of sunflowers, which is the national flower of Ukraine. I was incredibly inspired by all of your projects. I wanted to create a sunflower card myself. Simon Says Stamp has several amazing stamp sets that feature sunflowers, either alone or in combination with other flowers. I picked the Sunflower Garden stamp set for my project today. Now, all supplies I'm using for this card are listed and linked in the video description below for your convenience. I love all things abstract, and I also love to experiment with my Copic markers. This led me to a different way to color, which I like to call Copic blend-free coloring. Now, I say Copic because I use Copic markers for this technique, but other alcohol markers work just as well. The finished image has a modern graphic colored look to it, and the best part about it is you don't need alcohol markers that blend well together. In fact, the greater the difference in color or shade of your markers, the better it is for this technique. I know that we all have these odd marker colors in our collections that we can't really get to blend or to work with other markers in our stash, so this technique is perfect for utilizing these markers. It is also great for just trying something different for a change. I stamped the image in VersaFine Vintage Sepia ink. This is a very pretty brown color. I didn't want to use black as I was going for softer colors on my card. Now you can also try stamping in the type and color of ink that you usually use for no-line coloring and use this technique for a no-line colored result. I imagine that would look quite beautiful. I'm hoping to try it one day. I have not tried it yet. My stamping was done on Simon's 130-pound cardstock as I love this paper for coloring with Copic markers. I used my heat tool and I heat set the ink as the type of ink that I used is not Copic marker friendly and it bleeds when it comes in contact with alcohol. You can either set your stamped panel aside and let it dry for a few hours, or you can zap it with a heat tool to permanently set the ink. You can even add clear embossing powder on top and heat set it if you want, and I've done that in the past. I trimmed my panel to 3.5 by 4 3/4 inches and started coloring. The idea here is not to do any blending. To achieve this, you need to let the ink dry before you apply the next color on top of that first color. You'll see what I mean in just a minute. I began coloring my panel by using the lightest yellow. This is Y31 color in my case. I applied this color to all sunflower petals. By the time I finished coloring the bottom petals, the last petals, the top petals, the first petals that I colored were already dry. Here is a test flower that I colored using this technique before filming this video. You can see the petals have highlights and they also have shaded areas. Petals look dimensional, but the different shades aren't blended together. There's a clear difference between them. This is the look we're going to achieve. So I apply the next color, medium yellow, using the Y19 marker. In my head, I separate each petal into half or 2/3, and I color a section using this medium yellow color. I make some sections on some petals larger, some sections smaller, and I try to add this medium color to areas where I think the petals have slight shadows. I do so on all 3 sunflowers, and again, by the time I'm done coloring the last petal, the first petal I colored is already dry. I can add my next and final color to color the petals on these sunflowers. I'm using YR14, and this color creates shadows. I take the previous section colored using my medium color, and again, in my head, I divide it in half and color that half or a smaller half using the darkest yellow, which is actually almost an orange color. You can use this coloring method with many different images, and I've demonstrated this technique in the past, featuring both small and large images. It works not only for flowers, but for other types of images too. When you color with Copics, you typically saturate the paper with the lightest color or go back to the lightest color to blend all of the colors together. While the paper is wet, it makes it easier to blend the colors, hence why you would often start with the lightest color and apply it to the area you're coloring. When you color with alcohol markers in the usual way, you also don't want to color the entire image at once. You work in sections. You color one petal at a time, as this allows the ink to remain wet long enough on the area that you're coloring to help you do the blending. Here, we don't want any blending to take place, and in fact, it is rather best if blending doesn't happen. So color the entire image using your base color and even set it aside for a few seconds or minutes to let that initial ink dry. The darker you go, the less of an area you cover. And remember not to blend anything, just apply a solid layer of color. It is up to you how many marker colors to use to color your image this way. I would say use 3 markers, a light, medium, and dark. If you have a big marker collection, you can add a 4th or even a 5th color or shade to have greater color variation on the flowers and the petals, especially if you're coloring a large image. The flower centers were colored using just 2 colors, E37 and E79. I used the same technique here, and I first applied the light color. While the light color was drying, I worked on coloring the leaves and colored them using 3 shades of green, starting with a YG03. With this coloring method, I make sure to give the ink enough time to dry before adding my next color on top, therefore avoiding any possible blending. I also used YG17 to add shading to the leaves. By the way, you can try this technique not just with Copic markers. I know a lot of you have other alcohol markers in your stash, and I encourage you to try this coloring method with any alcohol markers you have. Some markers have a bullet nib, and I think using a bullet nib marker would work even better for this coloring method. I also have some Alt Nu and Tonic Studios Nuvo alcohol markers in my stash, and they both have a bullet nib, and they work amazingly well for this technique. I also used a B000 marker to create a light blue background, a sky background for my flower. Here, I used the flick technique and flick the color from the image away into the open area, applying a darker blue directly next to the image and fading it out into white. And finally, I added shading using YG67, the darkest green, to my leaves. I love this coloring method, and I love the final result. It looks very different from the usual blended coloring. I know this is not for everyone, but ever so often I like to color this way. If you struggle with blending using your alcohol markers, this might be a very easy way for you to color. Next, I stamped a sentiment for my card. I selected one that reads, "Have faith." We all need to have faith these days, and I believe in a peaceful tomorrow. Here, I used VersaFine Onyx Black ink to add more contrast to the sentiment. To add detail to the flower centers, I used my 0.5 Sakura Jelly Roll pen and added white dots in small clusters onto the brown centers. They help to create the highlights for the seeds forming in the center of the flower. I brought in my test image. I used it to try out various ways to color these sunflowers. And you can see the difference between the 2 coloring methods on the large leaf and on a few petals that I colored using the regular blending technique. I foam mounted this panel onto a light blue card base, and I added "Things Will Work Out" sub-sentiment cut out from one of Simon's pre-printed sentiment strips. I also embellished my card with a 4-leaf clover sequins from Simon Says stamp. Thank you for spending time with me today. Thank you for your encouraging comments, emails, and your DMs. I have faith, and I hope peace will be there soon. I hope you found this video useful and you'll give this idea a try if you haven't already. Love you guys, and I hope I'll see you next time. Bye!